Nuestra medicina es nuestra medicina del tiempo.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Bloem, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm really delighted with today's guest. And actually, I have two guests. I have Marina and I have Krysten, who will help us, with the Spanish translations because I cannot speak Spanish. But I'm really looking forward to speaking with Marina, who I will ask her to introduce herself.
Unrutzilewech, eonohilar, maltiosh, trejaraja, pan ashapun katzopar. Gran saludo para todos. Gracias al Creador del universo y gracias a este medio que llega a los diferentes continentes, diferentes personas. Me llamo Marina Cruz, soy Maya Tzutujil, vivo en Guatemala, que muchas veces le decimos Guatemala. Vivo por el lago Atitlán y soy descendiente de los mayas tutujiles. Mis padres son nacidos, mis abuelos, pues somos originarios. Mi linaje es originario de este pueblo. Maltiosh, gracias.
Hello to everybody. Thank you to the creator and former of the universe, and thank you to this medium of technology for reaching different people across different continents. My name is Marina Cruz. I am Maya Sutujil. I live in Guatemala, which many times we call Guatemala. I live in Lake Atitlán, and I am a direct descendant of the Maya Sutujil people. Thank you.
Okay. And for the listeners, we have really, I'm also grateful for the help of Krysten today, who has been on the guest on this podcast as well, and is at the moment based in Miami, right? Is that correct? Okay. Marina, what I would like to ask you, what was it like growing up in San Pedro, La Laguna?
Agradecida al universo de haberme dado la oportunidad.
I am very grateful to the universe for allowing me the opportunity to have been born in this marvelous village. The original name of this village is Sununya, which means the hummingbird of the lake. And it's a marvelous place that's full of a lot of magic and history. So really, I just feel very grateful that I got to grow up here in San Pedro.
And Marina, who were the people who most shaped you as a child?
Mis padres, mis abuelos, mi familia. Gracias también a la vida que me dio la oportunidad de nacer.
My parents, my grandparents, my family, I am really thankful for life, for giving me the opportunity to be born into this family. My father, my mother, my siblings, my grandparents, I was very fortunate to be surrounded by them.
And when did you realize that your father's role in the community was something special?
Nací en los años cuando realmente Guatemala estaba
I was
pasando
born during
por
the years when
una
realistically Guatemala was passing through a very strong stage of armed conflict. This armed conflict got much stronger when I was born, so the situation intensified, and this internal conflict between villages and the government meant that being indigenous was considered being a guerrilla fighter, a rebel, or somebody who was against the government. So during this time, my father's practice was mostly hidden. The image I had of my father was that he was a farmer, somebody who carved stone and lived a simple life. Everything spiritual was occult. I knew some people came to see my dad, surely to do consultations or receive guidance, but I didn't realize it until later when my dad was being persecuted by the government.
What I would like to ask you, Marina, is what lessons from your parents or maybe your grandparents still guide you today?
Mis padres sobre todo mi madre y mi padre, eh, era mucho más fácil ver a mi madre en el tema de sanación porque ella curaba a sus hijos, porque somos una familia muy grande. Mi mamá, mis
So it was a
papás
lot
tuvieron
easier
muchos
to see my mom as a healer because my mom was always healing all of my siblings. I come from a big family and we have many siblings, and my mom was always curing us with plants, with eggs, and there was a lot more practices of medicine like the traditional oral massages or mouth massages that she would do for us. Surely my dad had his own spiritual practice, but since he wasn't doing big fires, he had small candles that he would light where he would work with stones. These practices stayed embedded in me, and as I started to see my dad little by little with patients arriving, but it was prohibited for me to see or ask what was happening while he was doing this work with clients.
Um, and I have a question around that. So it seems that because, your dad was not really, a lot around, or, that he had to do was sometimes in hiding, etc. Um, your mother played an important role, right, in your upbringing and ultimately who you are today. Um, if you read about you and your background, it is though your father who is often, the stories about your father, not about your mother. Um, so yeah, can you tell maybe then a little bit more about the story of your mother? Because I would be interested to hear that in how she ultimately then played an important role of what you are doing and what you are about today.
Mi mamá fue una mujer muy valiente, era muy trabajadora, compartía mucho, compartía con la gente, con los vecinos, nos cuidaba a todos. eh, y
My
también
mother was a
todo
very
su
brave
tema de
woman. She was
sanación.
a hard worker. She shared everything, everything that she had with everybody, with all our neighbors. She took care of all of us. And she also worked with all of her healing practices. My mother actually took great care of my father. In Guatemala, we knew that if they knocked on the door at night, since there was a village mandate that we weren't allowed to leave the house after 6 p.m., we knew that if they knocked on the door at night, they were going to kill our father. So there was a lot of nights that we slept in fear, and we would go from house to house. Some nights my father would leave in the middle of the night. I remember maybe being 7 or 8 years old, and my mom would tell me, "You're going to go and you're going to take all of your siblings, play with them, and then you're going to go to so and so's house. And don't let anybody see you. We're going to go sleep with this family or with these grandparents." And this was a very common thing in the village where people would go and sleep in different houses. And there were moments where my father would go and sleep elsewhere. So, this is something I can share about my mom.
Y mi mamá, recuerdo que siempre les cuento a mi familia, mis hermanas mayores lo saben. Hubo una noche en que ella pidió
And
a
my
alguien
mother, I
que
remember, I always tell my family this story. My older sisters remember it. There was one night that she took all of my dad's sacred pieces. Maybe not the most important ones, but she took all the stones from the altar, all of his sacred tools, and she had somebody bury them. She did this so that if in some moment they came to the house and they did a search, since at this time being a spiritual guide was a charge for assassination or death. So in this way, she was protecting my dad. She took care of my siblings, her children. And in that time, we would hear the news the following morning that so and so was assassinated or captured. So in the 80s, my dad had to migrate to the city of Guatemala and he spent a few years there to hide. And my mom stayed with us with the daughters and she taught us how to sew and how to craft and how to do a lot of these things as well.
también hubo un momento en que, perdón, solo necesitas contar la historia de mi mamá. Hubo un
So,
momento en
sorry, I just want to share this one more story about my mom. So, first they took my dad to jail, and we didn't know why. He spent a few days in jail, and then they released him because the people protested. The village started to protest, asking for justice, and so he was released. Then my mom received news that my dad had gone to the city, and while they were en route to the city on the bus, they asked all of the men to get off and they kidnapped my dad. I honestly didn't know if we were going to see him again. But I remember my mom was screaming and confronting the military, and she was like, "If you take me, what are you going to do with my kids? Are you guys going to feed them? Are you guys going to give them something to eat?" She was very confrontational. She didn't care who she was talking to, if it was the army, if it was the government, who it was.
Thank you for sharing that story. And maybe I because I know the story that's behind why this is happening, but maybe not all the listeners are aware. So can you maybe in short explain then why in the 80s especially, during that time, the indigenous population in Guatemala had so many problems, with the people that were in charge and who was in charge at that time. Can you maybe, you know, tell the listeners a little bit about that so that they understand the situation?
En Guatemala ha habido, como en todas las culturas, ha habido invasiones, pero Guatemala sufrió una etapa, no me la sé perfectamente la historia, cómo surgió, pero en Guatemala hubo un conflicto
In Guatemala, there have been invasions like many countries. I don't know how it all started, but in Guatemala, there was an internal conflict between villages and the government. And this root has come from the time of the invasion of the Spanish. It has been an objective of theirs to exterminate our culture and our practices, to obey everything the government says, because this was the government who was making the rules and confronting the indigenous people. All men who turned 18 were obligated. They would literally take men from their house or capture them on the street and force them to serve in the military. It was the military against the indigenous people. And during these 36 years, or more than 36 years, we suffered this internal conflict. It's really a terrible story. They kidnapped people. In any moment, there were bombings happening. One of the villages around the lake, Lake Atitlán, that was most affected and attacked was the Sutujil from our Maya people. And the people that they targeted were the leaders of the community, the spiritual guides, the healers, and all of those doing this work. So it was the government against its own people. And the saddest part of all is that all of those people who served in the government, they were indigenous, but they were forced to act against their own people.
Thank you for sharing that story, Marina. I really think it's really important that we continue to tell that story because, the situation of the indigenous people in Guatemala is still not how it should be, right? And you're still dealing with the what has happened as a result during that time. So you're still fighting the fight in that sense. Um, your father was a daykeeper, right? That's what I understood. Um, you are as well. Can you maybe explain to us what does it mean to be a daykeeper, and when did you realize that walk in the footsteps of your dad? And am I correct in assuming that?
En Guatemala tenemos una práctica, nuestra práctica espiritual es basado a un calendario maya. Nuestra medicina es nuestra medicina del tiempo.
So in Guatemala, we have a spiritual practice that is based on a Maya calendar. Our medicine as Maya people is the medicine of time. The Maya had great doctors, great astronomers, great astrologers, but we also had great mathematicians. One of the greatest gifts our ancestors left us is a Maya calendar, and this calendar is based on time. It's perfect. Within this calendar, the practice integrates 20 different energies. It's a numerical calendar, and it's based on the length of time for human gestation. And then we also have a calendar that is a solar calendar, and this is what constitutes the way that we count time. So this is why, as Maya people, our first medicine is time, and spiritual guides are seen as counters of time. They are people who take care of what number and what energy is happening today. What does this indicate? What is it that we need to ask for or give thanks for on each of these days? And this is why a guide is also a counter of time, because they should never forget what number or what energy we are on. This is our connection between the dimensions, to the sky, to the earth, and what's beneath the earth. So we are counting the day, and these energies are based on the human body, because the calendar is based on the numeration of human beings.
I have a couple of questions for you about that, but before I ask those, um, when you maybe capture everything that you just mentioned, maybe we can call it Maya wisdom. I don't know if that's a good uh, translation in English. Um, but when was the moment that you understood that this wisdom was something you were being called to carry on, to carry forward?
Estos son, cuando nacemos aquí en este pueblo, o sea, los mayas, principalmente los mayas tutugiles, nuestras abuelas comadronas, las abuelas comadronas que reciben un niño o niña, es el que indica
As Maya people,
lo que
principally Maya
traemos.
Sutujiles, we have midwives or grandmother midwives, and when they receive a child, they indicate at that time what mission this child brings with them. In some moment, I remember my mom telling me that this was my mission. But since the time that I was growing up was politically charged, I never really thought much about it. I also can recall another time when an elder told my mom, "Take care of your daughter. She's going to be a medicine woman." Unfortunately, my mom ended up passing very early. She was only 41 years old and she had just given birth. She was very young. We were many children, and shortly after my mom passed, all of my older siblings that were women, they got married and they moved out. I stayed in the home. I still live in this same home till this day. I've never left. And I stayed with my father because I was the oldest of the six siblings who were younger than me. I was 17 years old at the time, and my dad couldn't do that responsibility alone. So I had to take that job and responsibility on to be a mother. I had to take care of my siblings, to cook, to clean, to make sure that they had what they needed. It wasn't until 2 years after the peace treaty, when something flourished here in Guatemala, that the spiritual guides started to make their ceremonies more public. Of course, it wasn't like today. There was fear, and there's still a lot of fear today for some people. But my dad was a dad who always supported us. He pushed us to do whatever we wanted. He gave us everything, and he taught us everything without excluding any of us. And he told me that I had to complete my mission, that I had to follow in his footsteps and learn. But I didn't have time because I was cleaning, I was bathing kids, cooking, sewing, studying. So I only knew that I had this responsibility and this mission. And I also knew that I had a lot of fear and I didn't want to fully accept it. I couldn't imagine myself speaking the way I do at the time or praying in public the way I do now.
Now, how do you feel about that? You have that life now, and the reason that I'm asking you the question is that I have talked with many people on this podcast, right? And I always ask, how, why did you become an anthropologist, or how did you become a singer? And sometimes there are people that initially, they are pushed by their parents to become a medical doctor and they don't want it. And maybe even they pursue it, but then ultimately they are happy that they find their own way. So, so how do you feel about, that you were told that you need to walk this path and then ultimately you walk the path? Are you happy with where you are? How does it feel?
Siempre creo que la razón y una de de las respuestas por qué en mi historia hay mucha historia con mi papá.
So there's a lot of history that's shared with my dad, and there's a lot of time that I spent with him as well. My dad was the type of person who couldn't say anything without accomplishing it. He always said, "Whatever you want to do, write it down, do it, visualize yourself doing it." One of my greatest desires was to study, and one of my dreams, which was only a dream, was to study medicine. But I wasn't able to do it because I didn't have the money to go study. And my dad would tell me, "Study whenever you have time, try to find a way." And so I did. I studied and I graduated as a teacher. And then my dad told me, "When you have the opportunity, go to university and study linguistics." He told me to study this because it was a very important theme in our society at the time. In our language, this is where the essence of life and all of our teachings come from. So it's important to study this. When I got my first job, this was when I learned, when you have a mission, no matter how much you don't want it, it will find you and it will hunt you down. My first job was one of the big projects in Guatemala after the peace treaties. After the peace treaties were signed, all of these organizations were created to capture everything that was lost during the years of war. They investigated indigenous rights, the spiritual practices, the medicine, the spirituality, and all of the cosmovision. I got this job. It was my first job in 1998, and I was investigating the rights of indigenous people. And life brought me on this path with coworkers who were all people who had just spent all of these years fighting in the war. One of them was this incredible woman who spent 15 to 20 years hiding in the mountains with nothing, surviving. All of them were spiritual guides and healers. So I was given the opportunity to amplify my wisdom and understanding of the practices of the indigenous people of my people. And when I had the opportunity to study, I studied sociolinguistics in university.
No, and thank you for that. And I think it's pretty amazing everything that you have done, and thanks for sharing that. When I was listening to you and was thinking about the question that I asked you, and my question came was based on my experience talking with other people or living in other societies. So maybe in many modern societies, people ask themselves the question, "Who am I?" I'm wondering, does the Maya wisdom ask maybe a different question?
Posiblemente los que no manejan el calendario, posiblemente acá también, con la diferencia
Maybe
es que
those who don't
acá,
work with the Maya calendar,
con la
or maybe
diferencia,
just people here from this region in general. I think the difference is that those of us here who had the luck to be received by a midwife, they tell your parents, your son or daughter is going to become this person. And then it's the parents' responsibility to guide us. This question you asked me, am I happy? I am very happy. I am so grateful. At first, I didn't want to be a spiritual guide. I worked on projects with NGOs, but the path always pushed me. Even if I wasn't practicing in the ways of the fire, I was listening to midwives. I was listening to spiritual guides. They were nourishing me. I knew my birth Nawal. It's Kat. I was seeing, listening, and reading about this Nawal my whole life. So I knew this is who I am. And due to the cards that life deals, due to the cards that life has dealt me, I was deathly ill. And my grandparents told me, oh, this is because you haven't accepted your mission. And once I took my mission on, I was the doctor of my family. I always cured my siblings. My oldest son, I never took him to the doctor. I didn't have money for that. I healed him with eggs and plants, and he always got better and was fine. And in that moment when I was deathly ill, the elders and the guides around me told me, this is happening to you because you are rebelling. You are rejecting a gift that has been given to you. And so I took on this responsibility almost out of obligation because of how bad my health was. But after I accepted my mission, I was like, okay, now I'm a spiritual guide. I'm going to work with the fire. But what's my strength? Shouldn't I have more strength or be stronger? And one of my sisters told me, you heal people. You've been doing this for many years. It's the same thing. So when I look back, I said that I always wanted to study medicine. But at the end of the day, I am in medicine. My work is medicine. I wouldn't change my practices or what I'm doing. I am satisfied. I know who I am, I know where I come from, and I know where I'm going. The Maya calendar shows us this. It shows us the energy of our conception, the energy of our birth, and the energy of our mission. So as we practice, as we understand, and as we utilize this calendar, we continue to learn who we are, where do we come from, and where are we going. I think that many times Western culture is very lost. They don't know who their grandparents are. They don't know who their ancestors are. They don't know where they come from. There's a lot of emotions and there's a lot of illusion that appears in the mind. People say, I don't know, I think I'm not doing well because I'm paying the price of my ancestors, or I'm paying this off because this was in my family lineage. So there's a lot of blame and confusion when there isn't this same guidance or this same origin of knowing where we come from.
Thanks again for sharing that. Um, what we try to do here is we walk virtually, right? We are at our own places, but we walk together. Um, so I would like to take you, out to the rest of the world. Um, So, looking at the world today, what concerns you most?
Nuestra desconexión. La desconexión del ser humano con la existencia, con este regalo de vida. Siempre
I
hemos
think what scares me
compartido,
the most is our
todos
disconnection.
hablamos,
The disconnection of the human being with existence, with this gift of life. We have always shared there's so many organizations talking about all the problems of the water, of climate change, of the environment. Many people raise money, create projects, but we have forgotten the essence of the spirit of these elements to take care of, to see, to enjoy, to speak to the water, to speak to the fire. We see the fire as something dangerous. We've forgotten how to see the essence and the life within it. We also have a lot of strong individualism. This has caused us to disconnect from ourselves and our families. The value of the family no longer exists. Kids live in one place, parents live in another place. Our ancestors lived in family because family is how you construct peace, how you construct connection. And we no longer have access to these teachings. If there's no families, there's no essence, there's no life. We just get together when somebody dies. So there's this disconnection with ourselves, with the spirit and the essence of things, and this leads us to disconnect even further from our own individual spirit. We are forgetting that life is short. Life is a short journey, and we have to return. And another big worry is that all this wisdom of our elders, it's leaving with them because there's no grandchildren or people listening who will continue to share and teach this because there's no interest, nobody cares.
So, Marina, what wisdom from your tradition do you believe then the world most needs right now?
creo que no hay uno específico, no podemos decir, cuidemos el agua, pero ¿qué pasa con el fuego? ¿Qué pasa con el aire? Nuestros elementos y nuestra conexión es tan importante y sobre
So
todo
there's
del
no one in
conectarnos con nuestra
specific. I can't say take care of the water. What about the air? What about fire? But it is important to connect with all of the elements. And above all, I think the most important is maybe to connect with our origins, our parents, our grandparents. If they're still alive, we have to take advantage and listen to their wisdom and what they want to share with us. This is the magic of the oral tradition. So it's not just one thing. But if I had to prioritize the family, the essence, the peace, the tranquility, because it's here that we will find who we are, where we come from, and this will allow us to in turn focus on where we are going.
So, Marina, there are many, challenges that we have in the world today, right? And we talked about that. Where do you still find hope? Where do you still see hope today?
Entonces, ¿dónde encuentras esperanza o ves esperanza?
La esperanza crece en uno mismo. Si yo me considero y si yo sé que soy una semilla,
Hope
entonces
is something that is
tengo que
born
hacer
within
yo
each person. I know that I am a seed and I have to
esa.
hold on to that and hold that hope. If we all lose hope and think there's too much negativity, we will get lost in that. So I start with myself. I know that I can't change the world, but I can start with changing myself and this will develop further from that.
Thank you. With a lot of people that I talked with, when I asked them the question, where do you still see hope? They answered, well, in the younger generation. So when I tell this to the younger generation, then they say, well, you cannot put everything on our shoulders. You need to play your role as well. So I want to ask a couple of questions about the younger generation to you. And that is especially in relation to spirituality. Because maybe the younger generation around the world is changing, or maybe not, depending on where you are. So my question to you is about the younger generation. What do you see happening in your community with regard to the younger generation and spirituality?
Vemos, sí, vemos un problema yo veo un problema.
Yes, I see a problem when it comes to the theme of the youth. Social media is a good thing, of course, but the younger generations are focused on that, and they are watching a lot of other cultures that are full of empty wisdom when it comes to daily practices. Many young people here are forgetting their language. They no longer speak our ancestral language, and we know that the language holds the essence of our life. There are also a lot of young parents, since we still have problems with discrimination, that tell their kids, don't speak the Sutuhi language or the ancestral language, only speak Spanish so that you don't have to face the discrimination and the hardships that we went through. So many youth are losing the essence of language. Fortunately, in this village, the practices continue. Many parents are realizing that by hiding the gift of their children, this leads them to a life full of illness, complication, or disconnection because they don't feel complete and they end up returning to these practices. This is why one of our big worries and big projects that we started to plant is developing and recompiling all of these teachings. We're working on building a center for learning and ancestral healing. And this includes a lot of these themes so that this wisdom will not be lost, so that we can interview elders, so that we don't forget all of this wisdom, because there are many things that are being forgotten, and we're trying to make sure as many as possible return.
Yeah, and that's really great to hear, Marina. From my perspective, very important. A joint learning, continuous learning, listening to each other. What I hope is that this little podcast is also contributing to connecting people. Because if you're able to connect people, then maybe they will start talking and listening to each other. So I try to weave that also into this podcast by connecting you with the previous guest. And the previous guest of the podcast has the following question for you.
How does community shape who we ultimately become? I think that's my question because community is shaped at pretty much every aspect of who I am. And I'm wondering, how does it show up in other leaders? And as leaders, what is our responsibility to allow community to shape who we ultimately become?
Creo que lo más importante es lo poco que sabemos que no es nuestro, eso viene de nuestros ancestros, que podamos compartir, compartir en las escuelas. Por supuesto, todavía no podemos decir que podemos compartir en las religiones porque es la religión que ha tratado de...
The little that we know that isn't ours, it comes from our ancestors. So for me, the answer to this is that we can share it. We can share it in schools. We can't say yet that we can share it with other religions because it is religion that has tried to make all of our practices invisible, but that we can have security and confidence in who we are. The confidence that our people know our practices are millennia of years old and ancestral. And also that we can coincide in spaces. No matter what, we all have something to offer, to teach. This is true no matter where we are. We always carry with us a seed, a word to share, to be able to exchange information with our families and everyone we come into contact with. And with this, we can contribute our own positive support for others.
Can I ask you to come up with a question for the next guest?
Como invitado, ¿cuál ha sido su gran potencia y qué considera para decir, qué es lo que consideran para poder continuar que la humanidad, no solo la juventud, porque para la vida no hay edad en las prácticas. Entonces, ¿qué considera? ¿Cuál sería importante que continúen los que vienen después de él o de ella?
So, what do you consider important for the younger or future generations to continue practicing to improve humanity?
Okay, Thank you for that question. I am happy I don't have to answer that question, but the next guest will. Um,
Gracias por esa pregunta. Estoy feliz que yo no lo tengo que responder y va a ser mi próximo invitado.
you know, Marina, I really like music. I listen a lot to music, so I always have a question about music as well, or about sound. Um, can I ask you, is there a song or a chant or a ceremony or a sound or a piece of music that represents who you are?
Como mayas nos conectamos en el sonido. Nuestra música, nuestra danza acá es el árbol del hormigo. Hormiga, no sé cómo se hormiga se llama el árbol, que es la marimba.
So, as Maya people, we connect with sound. Our music and dance here is known as the dance of the tree, which has become the marimba instrument. So, this tree has been carved and created to be a giant marimba. And we do a dance that's called el son. And we have sounds within these marimba tracks that are called the sunrise, the sunset, and they're connected to the elements. This is what identifies and represents us as Maya people. Related to the Maya, I know that we have ancestral songs, but I don't practice them, and my community doesn't practice them either, except the sounds to calm, like calming a baby or soothing a pain. So if I had to pick a sound that represents me, it would be these sounds that calm, that remind me not to have fear, because there is always someone taking care of me and guiding me. And in these moments, I know that someone is helping me calm down.
Como el que es una forma de calmarse, que te está diciendo que no tengas miedo porque hay alguien ahí que te está cuidando. Al momento de decir es porque te está durmiendo, entonces que se te quite el dolor. Son sonidos de calma.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Marina. Always have questions around the Sustainable Development Goals. We just would like to check if you are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals.
No lo he escuchado de las Naciones Unidas, pero el desarrollo
So I'm not
sostenible
sure
es,
about
por
these
supuesto,
specific goals,
es
but I know that our
uno de
grandparents and
los
our ancestors had sustainable development goals because they had land. They weren't being controlled. We can't talk about sustainable development where we have businesses that are encroaching on our personal space or stealing our land. So that's what I can share about that.
No, and that's great, and thank you for sharing that. So when you hear me talk about the Sustainable Development Goals that have been developed by the world, right, to work on together, and that there is another group of people, or maybe some of them are the same, that said, well, to reach those SDGs, you need to work on your IDGs, on your inner development goals. If you hear me talking about that, about those dynamics, that relationship, do you see a connection between those efforts and the Maya teachings?
Bueno, primero es importante del autoconocimiento de uno mismo.
Well, it's always important to know yourself, but it's also important the wisdom of the elders. Because when we speak of something being sustainable, our grandparents were self sustaining. They depended on themselves, their connection, their prayer, their words, their knowledge. For example, with their land, they had to know what is the essence of this soil? What does it produce? These are studies that are millennial, that are ancient. For example, a farmer might say, I want to plant black corn in this field. But an elder may come up and say, no, you can't plant this corn here. It needs specific soil. It needs specific elevation. It needs a specific climate. So if you listen to this wisdom, you can accomplish your goal. And this is the truth for big companies. This sacred wisdom comes from the external. It comes from farmers, for example, if we're talking about cultivating or of soil. So when we talk about self-sustaining, we have to really sit and examine our own capacity. What is our vision? What is our goal? What is our why for doing this? And if you have all of this and you know and you feel, and you practice, you will be able to accomplish these goals.
Do you think the future requires us to discover something new or to remember something we have forgotten?
Creo que los abuelos dejaron todo. Es que ya está todo. Nadie se está inventando. Todo está
I think our grandparents and our
para poder
ancestors left everything.
caminar
We
con
have
seguridad
everything.
en nuestro
Nothing is
futuro.
being invented
Debemos
today.
reconocer
And to walk with confidence into the future, we have to know our past. If we know all of the experiences of our grandparents, we can walk well. And the things that we go uncovering are things that our grandparents already knew. So it's a braid. We are braiding and weaving what comes from the past and creating a future. And these continue to weave together.
Thank you so much for our conversation today. And these conversations always go fast. But before I thank you for your willingness to talk with me today and to share your wisdom and for who you are, is there any question that I did not ask you today that I should have asked you?
Muchas gracias por hablar conmigo hoy, tener esta conversación. Siempre va volando el tiempo cuando tengo estas conversaciones. Antes de cerrar, ¿hay alguna pregunta que sientes que te debería haber preguntado?
todo es una cadena. Si vamos por más tiempo, más preguntas van a surgir. Considero que está bien.
Everything is a chain. If we go on, I'm sure that more questions will continue to emerge. So I think we're good.
Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best. And yeah, keep on being who you are and continue to do what you do. Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias. Te deseo todo lo mejor. Sigue siendo quien eres y sigue haciendo todo lo que haces para todos.
Muchas gracias. Gracias, Krysten. Gracias por estos minutos.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this time.
Thank you so much. I know Kristen has to go because you have another call, right? So thank you so much for your translation, and you, Marina, for really your story and everything you do. I'm really so happy that I was able to talk with you, and I will try to do the best, to edit it in a nice way so that English speakers can understand what you told us today. So thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias por compartir tu historia y todo lo que haces. Voy a tratar lo mejor posible para editarlo en una forma que queda bien linda para que las personas que no hablan español pueden entender todo lo que compartiste.
Muchas gracias. Gracias también otra vez, Krysten, por la traducción y conexión. Muchas gracias. ¿Cómo se pronuncia su nombre?
Maurice.
Maurice. Gracias, Maurice.
You're welcome.
Esperamos conectarnos en otro momento.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll connect again in another moment.
I'm sure about that. Thank you so much.
All
Thank you
right.
both.
Muchísimas gracias, Nana. Thank you, Maurice.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.